Hello and welcome to Between the Books. My name is Isadora.
And my name is Shannon.
And today we're going to be talking about Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we saw R.F. Kuang at her book tour because she came to our town and we got the book signed and everything. It was really cool. We're going to go through a non-spoilery section first. Then we're going to talk about the activity that we did. And then we're going to go into spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, you can stick for a little longer. Then read the book and then you can come back. But before we go into all that, Shannon, what are you currently reading?
So this is exciting because this was a book that was on my mid-year freakout tag.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm tackling the list. So the book I'm currently reading is The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling. And this was on my mid-year freakout tag as a book that came out recently that I really want to read. So it's a sort of medieval fantasy where there is a castle that is under siege by an enemy, and they are slowly running out of food. And I'm only about 70 pages in right now, but I like gothic fantasy.
Yeah.
I like medieval fantasy. It has knights in it, and magic, and I'm just really enjoying it so far. And I'll let you know my thoughts when I finish the book.
Nice. Is that a standalone?
Yes, it is a standalone.
Okay. Nice,
yeah.
nice.
But what about you? What are you currently reading?
I am currently still reading East of Eden.
East of Eden update.
Eden update. It's been a while. And I think I have like 2 more weeks before my workbook club is set to meet. So actually, I have to check if we're going to be away on vacation, if I'm reading this for nothing. Just kidding. I'm glad that I'm tackling this. But it's a long one. And I'm not necessarily having the greatest time reading it. Like, it's okay. I think it's going to be one of those ones where you get to the end and you're like, ooh, okay, everything was like building up to this.
You gotta hope at least.
Exactly. I hope. But I mean, it's hard to explain what it's about, but it's basically just follows like these different not different families, but like families and then their generation, a bit of like 2 generations. And they live in the Salinas Valley in California, ? And it's just kind of following their lives. And it has a lot of like references to the book of Genesis and like Cain and Abel and all of that. And just, so there's a lot of like little hints from that, which is, it's cool. It's interesting, but yeah, not loving it, but still going strong. Should be done by the next episode.
We'll wait for the next East of Eden update with bated breath. All right, so let's jump into Katabasis. So, when Alice Law's advisor is killed in a magical accident, which may have been her fault, Alice ventures to hell in order to get a recommendation letter from him in order to secure her future. Unfortunately, her academic rival, Peter Murdoch, has the exact same idea. Now the 2 of them are off to hell to save a man they do not even like. So, Isadora, what are your general thoughts on the book as a whole?
Shannon, I really, really liked this book.
Yeah.
Yes. There are some things I don't love, which we'll get into later. But overall, I think it's the type of book that I really enjoy. There's a lot of like stuff. I loved how everything was constructed, the world building. I loved how like, obviously they go into hell. So I loved how that was done. And I loved how real the characters felt and writing style. I had never read anything by R.F. Kuang before. And I was really afraid that it was going to be like a lot. But I felt like everything was very easy to read for me. And I just had a really good time. Like I really liked the characters. Yeah, I really liked most of it. But I don't want to get into too much in detail. So what do you think?
So I agree with you. I really enjoyed this book. Prior to this, the only book that I'd read from R.F. Kuang was Yellowface. And I feel like Yellowface is a very different book in genre, in tone than Katabasis. I also was really excited about the premise of this book because I
love hell.
I took a Greek and Roman mythology course in university, which is where I first heard the word Katabasis in like an academic setting and actually learned about what it was. And then I heard R.F. Kuang was writing a book about a journey to hell. And I was like, oh, I love this trope in general.
Yes.
I love stories about people going to hell and what they learned from them. And hearing that R.F. Kuang was going to write a story basically like referencing all those tales from before made me really excited. I also, since I'm going to be mentioning it multiple times throughout this podcast, I did go to graduate school. So this is a lot about what this book is about. And I really related to it and the setting and the characters' struggles throughout the story. So I also really, really enjoyed this book.
Yeah. I really like just character stories where the setting is also really interesting, which is kind of what this was. You know, like it is a fantasy book, but it wasn't fantastical. Like if that's the right way to describe it. You know, it felt very grounded, which I liked.
So first we wanted to talk about the overall writing of the book because there's a lot of discourse wherever you go on the internet about whether this book is dense or whether it's heavy-handed. And you talked about this a little bit in your general thoughts, but how did you feel about the writing style?
I really liked it. I think she's so talented. I was worried that it was going to be dense because of what I've heard about Babel. But this one, even though there's so many like intellectual ideas and very like academia, and I, unlike Shannon, did not go to grad school. But so even though there were so many like very high intellect conversations going on, new things that I had never heard about, I got everything that was going on, you know? Like I was not confused. I mean, there were things that I didn't understand, but it wasn't confusing me to the point of like, I don't understand what's going on anymore. I was just like, oh, a new thing that they're talking about that I don't know personally. But if I could look it up and like learn, you know, like sometimes you will read about characters who know more than you, and that's okay. And I thought that very easy to read. I thought overall entertaining throughout for the most part. And she kept me hooked. I liked it.
Yeah. So I said the only book I've read is Yellowface. I have read the first 100 pages of Babel like 3 times, and I keep bouncing off of it. I don't think it's because of the story itself. I think it's because of the mental headspace I'm in when I'm reading the story, which is I always pick it up when I'm like super busy and stressed. And I personally find Babel quite dense in the way that it's written. So I've struggled through the first 100 pages of Babel. I'm going to give it another chance. After reading Katabasis, I'm actually really excited to give Babel another chance. Nice. But I really thought it was going to be like Babel. And I was like really worried about reading it for this podcast because I was like, oh, if it's anything like Babel, it's going to be like a little bit harder to get through. Yeah. But no, in fact, I don't think it's like Babel at all. Maybe it is, but like only like surface level in the way that they both take place at a college campus. Otherwise, the way that it's written is so different. And I mentioned this before, the way it's written is also very different from Yellowface. Rebecca has the range, is what I'm saying. And it's very rare, I think, that I read so many books from an author and their books all feel so different. Yeah. So I really, I agree with you that I found Katabasis like pretty accessible to read. Yeah. And pretty easy to read. And in a way that I almost wanted more. Like I wanted hell to be described maybe even a bit more lushly. Yeah. Because I know she's capable of doing that. Yeah. But overall, I think you don't need to be intimidated by this book. Yeah, no. I think you can just dive into it and maybe you won't understand all the references that are in the book, but like that's okay. It's not vital to understanding the book as a whole.
Yeah. Something that she really does with this book is that she's got a lot of flashbacks. So we kind of are thrown into hell very quickly, which Shannon really likes. I'm a little hesitant. I feel like I personally would have liked it to be a slightly, like had like maybe one more scene before. But overall, I don't hate it. But yeah, she has a lot of flashbacks, which helps us understand the characters because they've got so much like internal struggles that aren't fully revealed until later in the book. And I thought that the way that she placed them was really cool. And like it worked a lot with us learning about the characters alongside like being in hell and going through this journey.
I personally really enjoyed the way that this novel was laid out. I'm going to also be comparing this book to like 10 other books because while I was reading it, I was like, oh, this reminds me of this aspect reminds me of this. The way the plot is laid out in this book reminds me of Ninth House. And this also confused me because when I go online, a lot of people are like, oh, Ninth House was confusing. I didn't get it. And I personally did not have that experience. I really enjoyed Ninth House. By the way, it's Ninth House by Lee Bardugo. And Ninth House is also told with a lot of flashbacks, and then you slowly learn about the two characters' relationship with each other primarily through flashbacks. Yeah. And this story is told similarly, and Vicious by V. Schwab, I think also just to like a lesser extent. The author has obviously taken time, and there's a lot of intent about where the flashback chapters are. I personally didn't think at any point I was taken out of the action of what was currently happening in the present. I always thought every flashback chapter helped inform what the characters were doing in the present and enhance the story at the point at which they were told. It's definitely, the flashbacks aren't told linearly at all either. I can understand why that might be confusing, where you're trying to figure out the timeline between Peter and Alice, but also not really.
It's not really, yeah. And even it just wasn't the point. Like understanding where things had happened wasn't fully the point. You know? Yeah.
So, yeah, overall, I really enjoyed the way the story was laid out. I like that we go to hell really quickly. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but I love jumping into the action like immediately. I think it's so fun when a story hooks you immediately. I understand why people don't like it. I personally liked it.
Yeah.
So the other interesting thing about the world building of this book that captivated me was the magic system. So the way that the magic is worked is that it's built off of logic paradoxes. And to be a good magician in this world, you kind of have to be self-delusional in the way that you can hold a paradox in your head. And through that contradiction, you're able to cast magic and momentarily reshape the world. And I thought that just concept is very interesting.
Yeah.
And it was used as a catalyst for R.F. Kuang to explain different logic paradoxes in the story that actually exist. And I'm someone who never picked up a philosophy book ever. It's not something I thought I would be interested in. But I was reading the logic paradoxes in this book. And what it reminds me a lot of is actually higher level math. Like the way I was first taught like logic notation is like if this then this is in math, like in mathematical proofs. And I think as someone who's like recently gotten really into like higher level math, because it was something I was kind of turned off by in undergrad, but now I find it like really interesting. I found this book specifically really interesting. And now I'm like, oh, I really want to learn more about like philosophy and like math. And I need F. Kuang to write a book specifically about math because I would love to read it. I have more to say, but do you have anything else to say?
No, I also, you didn't really mention it, but they use this with like the pentagrams and everything. Yeah. So that was really cool. It felt very, again, like because even though we had this magic in this world, it felt so grounded and so just like, yeah, this is part of the world. Like it didn't feel like big magicians and wizards in this world. It just felt like that's another thing you learn in school. Like if you want to study magic, you go into that, which I really liked the way that that was done. And I also like, now that you're talking about math, I liked how Alice was more towards logic and Peter was more towards math.
Yeah, I like that
too.
The
differences and how they would apply things differently, or would try to, like when they go to hell, they both have different and ideas of like how to get back.
Yes.
And theirs are like quite different.
Yes.
And how they get to it. It's really cool.
I think it's cool because you would assume that they think similarly because they have the same advisor and so on. But like often, like, at least I don't know often, but like when you're in graduate school, people have different interests and like you can be in the same field but still study like massively different things. Yeah. I just kind of liked, I mean, obviously it made the story more interesting, but I also just liked that Peter and Alice had opposing viewpoints of what hell would be like.
Yeah.
The other thing I just briefly want to mention is that I think R.F. Kuang does really well is introducing these logic paradoxes, but not like overly explaining them to the point that like the prose is suffers from it. And like you said, it's like, if you're interested in these things, just, you can go look them up. Like, there's this one potato paradox in the book that I read it and I was like, oh, I don't understand really what that was. And the goal of that section in the book wasn't to explain the potato paradox. Alice was also confused when Peter was explaining it to her. It was just like a bit of world building. And I was like, what does this mean? Because it was a math one and I was interested in that. And so I looked it up. I understood it. I read the Wikipedia page like a couple times. I got it. And then I was like, oh, this is so cool. And I explained it to my partner. And I'm like, this is what R.F. Kuang wanted. One of the things she said when we went to go see her was that her goal with this book is that it sparks creativity and in people. And that if people take something away from her book, specifically this one, is that an interest to learn about different things. And I think she nailed it, at least to me. Like, I just thought learning about all these things in an accessible way was super cool.
And this goes again with like the whole thing of her explaining things. I thought that I understood enough. I understood how the magic did. Do I understand paradoxes now well, the way that she would sometimes mention them? No. But it wasn't stopping me in my tracks in the way that would be like, oh, I don't understand, this is like ruining the book. No, I was just like, whoa, they know how to do this. And I'm just watching. I don't understand, but I believe they know what's going on. Which is like, it's about them. Like, I don't have to. I'm not a magician. I don't have to come up with these paradoxes and draw a pentagram and try to figure out stuff. So it's not like, I don't know. I think that it worked really well with the story. It felt real. And she explained it enough that like it didn't feel like something that wouldn't work. Because, sometimes like, you would read a book with some sort of magic and you're like, okay, this has like no foot to stand on. Like, this doesn't make sense.
I think like if you're coming from fantasy and you're reading this book, you're like, oh, I don't really understand the magic. Throw the book out. Like, I don't understand this magic system. It doesn't make sense. But it, like you said, this isn't a fantasy book. So the magic system isn't the point of the book, whereas it would like break a fantasy book. The point of the book is explaining Alice and Peter's relationship. And their experience in academia. And the magic system is a secondary to that.
And even though it was it didn't overpower anything, but it was still very well created. And unique.
And very unique, I would say.
And Shannon, do you want to talk a little bit about like the world building in terms of hell and how they get there? Because we can't go into too much because that would be spoilers, but I think that obviously we spent like pretty much the entire book there. And I think that was one of my favorite parts, just getting to explore that new world, I guess.
Yes, I definitely agree. So when we went to go see her, R.F. Kuang touched on her inspiration for this story and how she wanted to describe hell in her story. And we have a clip of it. So we're going to play it now for all of you to listen to.
Because I wanted to create a very syncretic and intertextual hell that was constantly referencing previous, I call them sojourners accounts in this book, but previous epics that had described the underworld. So I started with a Chinese Buddhist conception of hell, just because I hadn't seen a lot of that in Anglophone literature, and it's a lore that I grew up with and I find very entertaining. That's why there are 8 courts, and that's why they're structured like that, and why the ruler of hell is named King Yama. But then I did find that too restrictive for the big questions that I wanted to explore about eternity and the immortality of the soul and redemption and to change. So I spent a while just reading like all the major texts about hell, and I kept honing in on the points of overlap. One is the importance of a river. Almost every major culture and religion has a concept of a river, usually a named river, that demarcates the bounds between the world of the living and the world of the dead. And in Greek mythology, it's famously the river Lethe, but it goes by many different names. So I was tooling around with the clear importance of constantly moving water and this concept of a line in the earth and what that means about life and death. So there's that, and the river in this book is like its own character.
Yeah, so from the clip you can hear that she was inspired primarily from like Chinese Buddhist myths, and then decided like to properly tell the story, she would incorporate stories like Orpheus and Dante and create this sort of multi-religious hell almost. And I really like the way that she looked at all these stories from different parts of the world and found commonalities between all of them. Like, for example, like she said in a clip, the example of a river that exists in the stories I'm familiar with is like Greek and Egyptian specifically, but also in like Chinese and Buddhist like afterlife. And I like the way that she found commonalities between all of them and incorporated it into her stories.
Yeah, I agree. Because you and we're very interested in like what you talked about, like the Greek mythology, like specifically Greek mythology, I would say is what we're familiar with, with like Orpheus going down there. It was just so cool getting to see how she was going to play with that. I was not expecting how it turned out to be, and I thought it was just so interesting. And it was like both unique, but also I was like, yeah, this feels real. Again, like this kind of all goes back to like, for me, it felt like a very grounded book.
Yeah.
Real, because she took it from so many different things that we are familiar with. So, and it still made it her own and made it unique. So us, like when we were there, I was like, I love this idea and this makes so much sense.
Yeah, because you've heard these ideas in passing, whether you've like encountered Orpheus or Dante, or it's like a concept that you are unfamiliar with, like I was with like Buddhist afterlife, and like reincarnation, like stuff where it's like, I'd vaguely heard of these concepts. I like the way that she incorporated all these different myths into one thing. And I thought her like general inspiration is just like really interesting. It's like, and also very obvious that she did a lot of research beforehand.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And kind of like not only talking about the world building, but just talking about our experience seeing her.
Yeah.
She is so smart.
Yeah.
Oh my God. She was talking as like this girl. And we went to Google how old she was. She's not even that much older than us.
She's 29. Not 30 yet.
No, she's so soft-spoken, as you heard.
Yeah.
And she was just like so...
She's very well-spoken.
Yes, exactly.
Like every time... I have the same like admiration for when we saw V. Schwab. Yeah. Which is that both women are very, like, well-spoken. And I don't want to be like, oh, the idea of, like, author, like, trapped writing a book by themselves. But, like, it's very fun seeing, like, authors talk about their craft. I'm always going to love it. It's the same thing I said when I saw V. Schwab. And it makes me more excited to read the book. She also, like, gave some context to the book. Yeah. That if I didn't have it, I wonder if I would have enjoyed this book differently. Like, for example, she says that going to hell in this book is just a general metaphor for suicide. And suicide is brought up in the book, but seeing just the journey to hell, like, through that lens, like, I was thinking about it the whole time I was reading the book, and I was like, oh, this is an interesting way to think about this, like, metaphorically. Yeah. And it's not something I might have made the connection later on, but it's not something I was actively going to be looking for while I was reading the book. So I think that's just fun.
I know, yeah, I agree. And you know, actually, now that you're talking about it, I was thinking about this, how when we went to see V. Schwab, it felt so different because I think V. Schwab talked way more about the actual craft of writing. And I think our Juan talked a lot more about the influences for the book. Yeah. You know? I think it was a lot about her experience in academia and her, like, why she got to write this book. And she even talked about her, because she went to, was it Cambridge?
She went to Cambridge and Oxford.
Yeah, Oxford. She talked about how she was in the rowing team and everything. And then, like, that kind of, the whole water thing kind of led to this. And she's in Yale right now, guys. Crazy. Crazy. But it was really interesting reading this book, because this book felt a lot like a Write What You Know. Like when I was reading it, I was like, this feels very, very real. Like she's gone through stuff like this. I can tell. Like stuff that I could relate. And I was like, I've never read someone talk about it this way. And I wonder like where she got that from. And you can tell by that conversation that we heard from her that it was a lot from her life and from her experiences that she took out of it. So, yeah. It was really cool. It was really cool seeing her. I recommend trying to see an author and hearing them talk about the book before you read the book too, because then you can go into it with that.
In both cases, I don't regret, like, even though I didn't end up liking Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, I don't regret seeing
Yeah.
V. Schwab at all. And like you said, authors will draw a lot on their own experiences.
Yeah.
So hearing them talk about those experiences before you read the book, I think is super cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of it for non-spoilers. We've got a lot to talk about. A lot of stuff happens in this book, guys. So if you haven't read it, make sure to go read it. We really recommend it. And then you can come back and listen to us talk about it. Bye. Okay, so we're into spoilers right now. I think because we were just talking about hell, we can go a little more into the detail of what it looks like. So, Shannon, we get to hell. What does it look like?
So we start off in the fields of Asphodel, actually. So before we get
A familiar place.
scene.
Part of this one.
Yeah. And once they get their bearings, they get past it, we realize that hell is structured based off of like the person's perception of it. So in this case, for our two main characters, it is set out like a college campus, at least the first
3 courts?
3 courts of hell. So the general overview is that hell has 8 courts in it, representing different sins. Similar to, I think, the courts in Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, so currently, these are the courts that are in hell right now. So what the courts that we see are pride, desire, greed, wrath, violence, cruelty, tyranny, and then there's the 8th court, which we don't really know what it is.
Yes. And at least the first 2 courts, because the way it's structured in the book is that it's more based off of the person's perception of it at the start. And then once you get further in, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the latter courts, it becomes more abstract.
Yeah.
But the first 2 courts, pride and desire, are like a college campus. And I think, obviously, it's really cool. There's a line that Peter says, I think, close to the end of like the 2nd or 3rd chapter, where he's like, hell is a college campus. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
Tracks.
And it just helps tell the overall story, because at this point in the story, like we said in the non-spoiler section, we get to hell in the first chapter. So we don't really see the two of these two. We see them in flashbacks as the story is told eventually, but we don't see the college life. Yeah. So I was, at the start, you might be like a little bit disappointed that you're like, oh, we're leaving the college behind so quickly. And it followed you there.
It really does, yeah. Because I remember when I started reading and they went straight to hell, I was like, but I remember R.F. Kuang talking about so much about Cambridge and how influenced it. I'm like, what do you mean? We're not even gonna be there. But no, we were. It really felt like we were.
Yeah. And I really enjoy how the first 2 courts feels like, although now that I'm thinking about it, they didn't really do anything to get out of desire. They
just walked away.
They just walked away from like the sort of...
I think same for the first one too, with Pride.
With Pride, they have to trick someone.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So the Pride feels like the kind of only court where they have a test that they overcome and then get to leave the court. In Desire, they kind of just walk around the problem. And in Greed, I do actually like the test in Greed. Oh, yeah. Which is, it's not a college campus, but that's where they encounter the Weaver girl. And they have to do like it's not the prisoner's dilemma, but it's like you have to agree with your partner, and it's always...
Without seeing what they're choosing.
And it's like always advantageous to like betray your partner, but they have to take obviously their feelings into account. Yeah. I think that was my favorite court.
That was intense.
Yes.
Especially because like, we'll talk a little bit about it more later, but the whole thing with Alice's mind, and like you can see how much she's been affected, especially in the beginning with her. Like there's at one point where she almost like walks into the river. She feels like drawn to it. And when she's in Desire, she's like basically losing her mind to the point that she has to like burst out, like leave, and she's like throwing up because she's like feeling so affected by it. And then with this one, in that particular, with the test with the Weaver girl, you read her thoughts, and you can see like her thought process, and you can tell that she's about to make a mistake. Yes. And it's so stressful.
But it's so believable.
But before we kind of talk more about that, I just want to go back to Desire. I thought that was so intriguing. I just loved how like they were in it was a dorm room,
the dormitory,
yeah. And they would go into different rooms, and they would see people doing different things.
Yes.
And like, it was almost like an addiction. You would see like what people would be addicted to, and some of them were just so random.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't expect. And that was so interesting how they were affecting them. I really, and that's kind of something that I will eventually miss in the later courts once we get to them. I totally get how, like, what happened with the most, like, getting it more abstract and changing and all of that. But I really liked seeing how R.F. Kuang would turn desire, you know, what would desire would look like.
Yeah,
you know?
and I wish that sort of idea permeated
a little
more into the latter courts instead of it becoming just more abstract towards the end.
But yeah, I guess moving on from the Weaver girl then, she makes a mistake. She basically betrays Peter, and they get rescued by Elspeth.
Yes.
And Elspeth is someone, it's interesting because it is someone they know about. I think that was really cool. That I did not expect that to them to get there. And they hadn't met her, but they had heard of her.
Yes.
She was like a Cambridge student who was also under Grimes, Professor Grimes as an advisor. And that was cool. I liked that.
I liked Elspeth a lot as a character. I really like how she came back at the end. I think we'll talk about it when we talk about the end of the book. But I was like, I really enjoy Alice and then eventually Peter deciding to betray her because it plays a lot into the themes of the story, which is like individualism in academia and them having to realize that they are not each other are not the enemy. Here I'm going to talk about my experiences, but I was saying this to Isadora, but it's very easy when you're in academia to compare yourself to other people. And this is the aspect of the story that I really enjoyed because R.F. Kuang does a really good job at portraying that individualism because there's like a saying in academia, which is like publish or perish. The quantity of the work that you do will directly correlate to how much money you will get to continue doing your research. So it's oftentimes, especially when you're a graduate student and you don't have like papers or conferences or like even experience under your belt and you're like struggling to like try to do better than your peers. Obviously, it's a fallacy and that you can't put how much like paper work that you do or like conferences doesn't directly correlate to how much research that you do. Not all the time, at least, because you're trying to quantify something that's more nebulous. But it's very competitive field. And so Alice and Peter deciding to betray Elspeth because they need to be the ones to get out of hell. And Elspeth being like, you can equate her to like the PhD student that's been there for like so long and hasn't been able to like graduate or get out of hell in this instance. And it's sad to read about that they come to that conclusion, but it's a conclusion you can understand how they got to because they need to survive, in this case, hell, but in the metaphor, academia, through any way possible. And that's why I really enjoyed their time with Elspeth. Because I could feel that anxiety, and while I was reading the scene, I was like, "Oh, they're gonna get caught. Like they're gonna mess up." But I understand why they tried, and I understand why they couldn't just ask Elspeth to help them.
Yeah, I think going along with just this whole academia thing, it was so interesting. I guess like because it was about their experience, it was like kind of hell, like we were talking about, like she was shaped around like them in a way. They ran into so many people who had gone to Cambridge or were in like academic people, and even like at the beginning in the fields of Asphodel, they meet those shades that don't want to move on, and that's because they don't want to like forget, because if you move on, you go to the river Leith and you drink the waters and you forget and you eventually like reincarnate. And a lot of them were like, okay, but we have all this knowledge, like we're academics, we studied, we have all this knowledge, we can't like throw it all away, we're gonna be nothing without this, so why would we want to move on? Like if we can stay here forever and have this, which is also, they meet people in Pride like that. They talk about with other people later. It's just like, why would I choose to be anything else other than like, even though like them, literally all they are just like students who have that knowledge, but they're like, that's still worth it. Like, I don't want to have to start all over again. And what if I start all over and I don't end up going to university? What if I end up being dumb or something? And it was the way that they were talking. They were talking so highly of it to the point that that was all that mattered.
Yeah.
In life.
Yeah. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I really enjoy the arc of Alice's tattoo. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk briefly about each of the characters, starting with Alice. We'll talk about the tattoo now because I really like the story that it told, which is that Grimes gives her like a pentagram on her skin, which you're not supposed to do because that's awful.
And also it was like a test, like a human test. Like that was not proven. That was a thing that they're
actively researching. Yeah. And we'll talk more about Grimes as a character. But Alice willingly lets it happen, partially for the reasons that I explained earlier, which is like when you're a graduate student, you want to jump at the chance to help with anything because you have nothing.
Yeah.
And she at that point was already at a low point with Grimes and wanted to do anything to get back into his favor. So she gets a pentagram on her skin and she's able to have perfect memory. She can recall everything. And if you're a scholar, isn't that the best thing ever? That you can just remember your textbooks and you can read dictionaries and understand languages.
Yes.
But the way that it's treated in this book, which I think does a really good job, which is that it sucks.
Yeah.
It is awful because you're not able to sort through your memory. Yeah. And she is
There's just too much in her head.
Yeah, she's like constantly having hallucinations.
Yes.
And this reaches a like high point during the Weaver Girl scene that we mentioned earlier, where you can see the breakdown that she's happening and the way that is written. And you can like imagine the memories that she is seeing that's like overlaid on top of each other. And she just can't sort or understand any of her memory.
And everything probably feels so like it just happened.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because she can recall in such great detail that it's like this that she remembers that happened like months and months ago feels like it's still impacting her so much right now because she can't forget it.
Yeah, and the other thing that I loved about it was that just because she has perfect memory and can remember conversations with people doesn't mean that she perfectly understands people's intentions. So she'll replay scenes multiple times, especially about Peter, and be like, oh, Peter was obviously grimacing in that scene. Like I can see it in my head. He was obviously disliked me. And I liked the way that even though she had perfect memory, she couldn't go past her own biases. Yeah. She's self-delusional like that. And it plays back into like the delusion and being able to cast magic in the first place. Yeah. But what I really liked was the end of the story. I guess we can talk more about the end, but eventually her tattoo gets washed off by the River Lethe. And it like shows that like she is fine accepting like a flawed memory. Like she's grown at that point in the story. I just like that. I like that aspect of the story a lot.
Yeah, me too. I guess we can just jump into talking about characters right now.
Yeah.
Let's start with Alice.
Yeah.
And Shannon, I think you have more to talk about Alice than me, just because you can relate a lot with the academia stuff. I know we just went a lot through that, but do you have any more thoughts? What are your...
The other thing I just want to briefly mention about Alice is her overworked grad student personality, which this book, you have the similar feelings with me, writes things that are uncomfortably relatable. Like to Alice, she'll be like, oh, I can live off of like this piece of bread, which will give me my nutrients for the whole day as long as I can devote more time to studying. And I will like pull all-nighters and whatever and suffer basically along the way as long as it leads to academic success.
Yeah.
And obviously this is a flawed argument, but it's something you see so much in academia. Like, for example, if you're in school, pulling an all-nighter is almost a point of pride. You're like, oh, I stayed up all night to write my essay. And it's like you're kind of bragging when you do that because you're like, my suffering is noble.
Yeah.
And it's also why I like a piece of media like Delicious in Dungeons so much because the core of the media is that is a flawed take. You need to take care of yourself in order to do better work. And the point of the story is that Alice's logic with being a grad student is incorrect and that she should take better care of herself over the course of the story. She doesn't like come to a conclusion at the end of the story and is like, oh, I should learn better. But the narrative punishes her basically along the way.
I was thinking, that's just made sense to me because we were talking about some people aren't like loving the side of Alice.
Yes.
And I think the thing is that we don't have a specific person there to be like, Alice, what you're doing is bad. And then she's like, oh, you're right. It is bad. Like, there's no one here, like, that the job falls on us in a way to like see that and see exactly like what happens in a narrative and everything and see how it's affecting her. There we go. There's no one being like, and this is why this is bad.
And this is why misogyny is bad.
But because there's no one doing that, it does not mean that the author is being like, hey, this is fine and good. Alice is correct. Like, no, she's clearly a flawed character. She's clearly going through a lot. She's clearly mentally ill.
Yeah.
And it's our job to catch those like details and come to the conclusion that she's not okay.
And it's why this podcast episode is going to be very long because there's just so much to talk about. I don't think I like that R.F. Kuang lets readers come to their own conclusions about like her work to the point where I almost understand why people think it's heavy-handed. Like people sometimes have this criticism of Babel. I've not read Babel, but it's what I've heard. And also I've heard people have this criticism about this book. But then people will read this book and just read it literally. And I'm like, this woman can't win with you guys.
And you know, it is heavy-handed, but when you're in that situation, it is all-consuming.
Yes,
and it is all you think about. It's all you talk about. There's a lot of stuff in this book that I personally couldn't relate, but I was like, no, this makes sense that she's talking so much about this and she's coming up with like so different sides, and it makes sense that she's feeling this way because when you're going through something kind of traumatic, it is taking over your life, and this is like part of who she is, you know. Well, yeah, another thing that like I really liked, there's this one chapter that talks about, and I guess we're gonna go a little bit to Peter as well.
Yes,
but there's this one chapter that talks about how it's from Alice's perspective, and it's her falling in love with Peter. And they're basically put together to do this kind of last-minute project. They're pulling in all-nighters. They're spending, like, every moment of the day together. And they get so close together, and I could relate. Alice is so worried that once this project ends, Peter is just not going to pay her attention anymore, or she's gonna be like, oh, he's gonna realize that I'm just a dull person, and she's not gonna like this. We're stuck in this through like trauma bonding and just like being in close proximity, but eventually we're not. Like that was her biggest worry, and it does kind of happen because of other reasons as well. But my job, I won't go into detail, but my job and just like my field that I work on, it's a lot about being really close to a group of people for like a month to a year too, and it can be traumatic at times. It's very stressful, and there is like that bonding, and it is very much like that. Like you're talking to each other the whole day, all day, and you get so close to these people, and you're always kind of worried that when the project ends, will they still care about me? Will they still want to be? Are they only with me right now because we're here together? Are we only having fun and having these conversations because we're kind of made to because of the situation? Yeah. And the way that she was explaining it, I was like, whoa, this is too real for me right now. Yeah. Just the words that she was writing down and Alice's feelings about Peter. The whole thing with her, like, I'm like, how can I put so much of my love and so much of myself into this person, into this relationship, just for like it not have mattered? And yeah, I was like, whoa, Rebecca.
This is a tangent, but like I think it's a sign of really good writing that we were able to like relate to different parts of the story. And it's like, I can like vaguely like relate to that, but I think not to the extent that you can. And I just enjoy that we took away different aspects of the book. So you don't have to relate wholly to the entire book. Yeah. But I enjoy that different people will get different things out of this book. And I think that's really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And then kind of like moving on to Peter. Yeah. Then it gets to the point kind of halfway through the book, like about halfway through, when we're getting a lot of flashbacks, and also it's the moment where they're sharing why they're really here. Yes. And Peter talks about how, because a lot of Alice's memories of Peter is him being very distant, or like suddenly he's very close to her and then suddenly he like disappears for days. Back in Cambridge, and she doesn't understand like why he acts the way that he acts and all that. And we find out that he has Crohn's disease, and we see him struggling through that, and just how he's kind of been treated to, because he's got his invisible illness, how he's been treated to think that he's exaggerating, and that like because it's not visible, like you're fine. And there's a point where he even tells Grimes, he's like, he doesn't tell anyone else, but he feels that he has to tell Grimes because obviously he's slacking and work and stuff, or he's missing classes and whatnot. And Grimes, the way he's like, you have to stop feeling sorry for yourself type thing, and being like, this is not an excuse, and because you look fine type thing. And then just, the way Rebecca was writing it, but I was like, wow. Yeah, that's tough. It is a tough one when you are suffering through something that it's not visible, and you definitely get to your head and you're like, maybe I'm making this up. Maybe it's not as bad as I think. Yeah. And maybe I should just fight through it, which is, kind of applies to mental illness and stuff too. It's the same thing with Alice. She's like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. We're going to move on.
She even has this like passage like when she is talking to Elspeth or thinking about Elspeth because Elspeth ended up killing herself. She kind of sees that as like the failure. And Alice obviously has some internalized like anti-mental illness that she needs to work through. But she also is obviously mentally ill as well. Because just like the way that like her memory is described is like this kind of anxiety that she has is also like something she struggles with but doesn't try to outwardly like show. But yeah, like you were telling me this before we started this podcast, but it's a refreshing thing to read because it's not something you see a lot in books specifically.
Yeah, you don't see that representation in that done that much. So I think Ira Kuang did a really good job at showing that side and like showing and giving more depth to the characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to talk about Professor Grimes now as a character and the way that he looms over Alice and Peter. Because he sucks. He straight up is a bad guy. To the point where he's almost, to me, felt like cartoonishly bad of an advisor. Because he is constantly like pitting Alice and Peter against each other. Again, that like individualism in academia where he will go to Alice and be like, oh, why can't you be like Peter? Peter is like doing all the stuff. Why can't you be like Peter? And then he'll go to Peter and be like, oh, Alice is constantly working. Alice is, going to do this, this, and this. You should be more like Alice. And them not realizing that Grimes was talking to each other about each other and saying things like that to them because they would be constantly looking for admiration from Grimes.
Oh yeah.
And
they thought of Grimes so highly that anything could be excused. And even in hell, in this journey, even when they're talking to each other about these issues, they're still kind of they keep defending it. Especially Alice, we're in her head really. So we see how she knows the bad things that he's done, but she's also like, but I need him, I need him to like me.
I think you can kind of see this paradox almost in the way that she hates Grimes but like needs his appreciation in the way that her plan to get Grimes back which is a crazy plan, which is that she's made like a corpse and wants to get him to inhabit it and then like get all the information that she can out of him and they kind of keep him as like a pet or like a trophy. And then you read that and you're like, Alice, you're crazy. Like that doesn't really make any sense and like probably isn't gonna work. But she is so like, you read how overworked she is, how tired she is, how much despair she is going through. I don't think we've talked about this yet, but the fact that she believes that it is her fault that Grimes died. And Peter has his own story about how he believes it's his fault that Grimes died. And they're still like, Alice mostly is trying to like come to terms with the fact that she doesn't want anything to do with this man, but also constantly needs his validation. And you mentioned it before about how there's a scene where Peter is talking to Professor Grimes about his illness. and about how it's affecting his work and is shut down by Professor Grimes, I'm realizing now there's actually a similar scene from Alice's POV where after she gets sexually assaulted by Professor Grimes, she goes to Helen, the other female faculty member, and doesn't get any sympathy from her and is dismissed of her feelings and saying, oh, but it was just a kiss. And you read the scene, it's obviously not just a kiss. But she is belittled, and because she's not like a feminist in the way that Helen is a feminist. So you have these two scenes of both these characters going to like people they respect and being like shut down. And it's only when they find closure within like each other. And I like that. I like that parallel in the story.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, there was miscommunication between them. But it fits with their characters.
It's
Alice would not open up to Peter about this, and Peter would not open up to, because of the ways that they, like, the beliefs that they had in their heads.
Yeah.
You know? So I think this was a good case of miscommunication.
I think it really added to the story, and I mean, it just adds to like the overall story R.F. Kuang was trying to tell, which is that the delusion these characters need to go through. There's this thing she said when we went to go see her, which is that she truly believes academia is so insular that the best thing grad students can do is be friends with people that aren't grad students. And I kind of believe that. Because you get a sense of what the outside world is, quote unquote, really like. Yeah, I think the insularness of this story is well told. Professor Grimes also, one of the things that he does to Peter is that he ends up stealing Peter's work and taking it on as his own. And this was another like contradiction in the story that like Alice has to work through, but I also really like, which is that Grimes, the way that he presents himself is always like the pinnacle of like thought and like how academia is like noble and stuff, but he succumbs to like base desires like all the time. Like obviously the way that he like treats the younger female advisees that he has, and the fact that he feels the need that he needs to copy Peter's work to make it his own. Shows that this man obviously is fallible.
Oh yeah. He's pathetic.
He's pathetic, honestly. And so I think we're gonna transition to talking about like the end of the story, but really quickly, the thing that I enjoy about him copying Peter's work is that it ends up being Peter's work that undoes him at the end of the book.
But yeah, anyways, all of these things we learn when they're stuck in this trap.
The Escher trap.
Yeah, and it's funny that this is one of the things that like I kind of didn't love, but also it might have just been because of the time of my life that I was reading it, and I was very tired, and I was like, why are we were stuck in the flashbacks for a bit while they were sharing all this information, and I did really love the flashbacks, but at one point I completely forgot that they were trapped in there. And I was like, I don't remember where we were before this all started. I was kind of like taking away from the main plot and put into the other plot, but then we quickly were brought back. And bad things happen to Peter.
Peter dies.
I did not believe Peter had died the whole time. I was just like, no, he escaped. We didn't see it, so he escaped. I knew for sure he was going to come back, though. But I think starting from this point, I stopped loving the book as much because I really liked how they were playing along throughout it. I really like having two characters that can have like that banter, that dialogue, and like I really liked Peter, and then he left, and then I was like, I want Peter back, please.
I feel a similar way, which is that this is when the book dropped from, like, up until this point, which is, like, maybe 60% of the way through the book. I thought this book was for sure going to be 5 stars.
Oh, yeah.
I thought I was going to, like, if Becky manages to stick the landing, then this could have easily been a 5-star read for me. But from this point on, we're left with just Alice. And also, this is when the flashback chapters stop. There's like 1 or 2 more, I think, after this. But they aren't as interspersed with the current timeline as they were in like the first 60% of the book. I understand why R.F. Kuang did it. It was to make Alice's grieving more of the focus of the story. But I wish it was different.
Yeah, and this is also when we get to that more abstract hell.
Yes.
And we don't have like those physical manifestations
No.
of buildings and stuff like not really. Eventually we kind of go back to that, but at one point it just feels like she's in this desolate wasteland.
Yeah.
And it feels and you know, she does well in the sense of making us feel as like down as Alice does, which is not I don't love, but I also appreciate how that affected the reader, you know?
Yeah, so the like final 4 courts are kind of nothing.
Yeah.
It's just kind of montaged away and Alice like trekking through the wasteland and then finally making it to like the 8th court, which is like the city.
Yes.
And you and I don't love the city.
I don't love the city now. I was confused in the city.
I was also confused in the city. I will say that the part of the book I actually want to reread is the city.
Yeah.
Because I was reading this part of the story and you know that Peter's going to come back. You know the story isn't just going to end with Kuang killing Peter 60% of the way through. So I was like kind of anxious reading the city bit because I was like, if the ending doesn't stick, I'm going to feel like I wasted my whole time in this city bit.
Yeah.
So I feel like that kind of meta perspective took me out of the story.
Yeah.
And also the city was very, I don't think it added really much new to the story for how long it was.
Yeah.
It was quite a long part of the book.
And then like new characters are added
Yeah.
and because she meets John and he is kind of guiding her through the city and then she meets another character that takes her to this citadel.
Yeah.
And there in the citadel she learns a lot about she not learns a lot, but I think that's kind of a turning point in her mentality.
Yes, it is.
Which was interesting.
Yeah.
But it was very like, it wasn't a high action scene. You know what I mean? It was very internal.
I just wish we could have gotten the same kind of characterization. Like, I think the characterization of Alice is still strong.
Yeah.
But I wish we could have gotten that characterization differently.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it was told to us differently.
Yes. Yeah, but then after, she kind of is with that guy again, John, and I feel like I missed something, and maybe I did, but the way Alice would talk about their connection, like, she really liked that guy all of that sudden, and I just couldn't understand why he was so special, and we're kind of wondering if maybe he was, like, a reference to an actual, like, maybe literary character of some
we
sort
just don't know it.
that we just don't understand, or maybe I just have to reread it again and see.
I don't think it's that.
Yeah, she was like, we've made such a connection, he's so special. I'm like, this is just a guy that's following you around.
Yeah, either like he was R.F. Kuang's made someone up, in which case I don't know if he was explored efficiently enough, or he's a reference I didn't get.
Yeah. I would say that what I thought was kind of funny in the city is when suddenly everyone started catching fire and Cerberus came up and everyone was like running to them and she was like, why are they running towards that? Like, that's fire. That, like, it must be painful. And then Gertrude, I think, was the one that said, she was like, well, they'd rather feel that than nothing at all. Like, this is like something different. This is like pain is a feeling.
Yeah.
As opposed to them just kind of being stuck in this like eternal hell. So Cerberus, they were like, Cerberus, bite me next, please. Which was, I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Seeing how they're stuck in this like horrible, like never ending days and something comes up and they're like, yeah, I would rather feel pain. I would rather feel something than nothing. So I did appreciate that part. It was kind of funny. But then after that, she leaves and she goes.
She fights the Kripkes.
The Kripkes, which are responsible for Peter's death. We haven't really mentioned them. They're kind of like the side characters that we don't really see until the end.
Yeah, they kind of aren't. They act as an obstacle to our protagonists, but there's nothing really important about them. They just kind of serve as like a physical fight climax to the story.
Yeah, I think if we had seen, because we had seen like their little bone creatures that were attacking them.
Yeah.
But I think if we had seen them before on the earlier scene, I would have appreciated this final scene more.
I almost kind of wonder, like, if we saw Peter's death from a very passive way, which is like Alice observing it like from a distance. She was like really far.
Yeah.
And which is why like you think that Peter's still alive, maybe. Because like we didn't really see Peter's death. And I wonder if we saw Peter's death more viscerally.
Yeah.
And based off of scenes that happen later on in the story, and also just Grimes' death, which is very visceral. R.F. Kuang doesn't shy away from visceral stuff.
Oh no.
And so I think even if we just saw that scene more vividly, maybe we'd feel more when we Alice fought the Kripkes. In general, I actually thought the scene was good.
It was cool.
But I think it would have hit harder, like you said, if we'd seen the Kripkes earlier on.
Yeah. I did find it interesting that they're also people that Alice knew in real life.
Yeah.
Like she had seen them before in like talks and stuff. And I thought that was interesting how a lot of hell was just based on their experiences.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. But yeah, like for them, like we mostly just hear about them from Elspeth and stuff.
Yes.
And like what they're doing in hell. So they didn't feel like, even though they did kill Peter because we didn't fully see it, it didn't feel like they were killing him for a reason too. So the whole revenge thing was just like, it felt, because that was when Alice was like, I need to kill them.
Yeah.
Like, that's my revenge for Peter. But felt, I don't know, it didn't feel as big as I kind of wanted in terms of the space that it took in the plot.
Yeah.
Like, as a scene, it was cool. I liked it.
Yes.
But in terms of, like, the importance of it, yeah.
And then Alice finds Elspeth again, which I love that she came back, and they are able to like reconcile the fact that Alice betrayed her earlier on. I personally think Elspeth did nothing wrong.
I know. I like how Elspeth apologized too. She's like, I'm sorry, I'll let you guys.
I was like, you did nothing wrong, girl. But you see Alice's like growth at that point in the story, that she like apologizes to Elspeth for her actions. And then we make it to Lord Yama, the devil himself, who gets Grimes in front of Alice, the person we've been looking for in this entire book. And Grimes like thanks Alice for killing him, which I think is like really cool, actually, like in terms of like how he would react, because now Grimes can just think. He's transcended his body. He can all he can do is research, and he wants Alice to like join him. And I really enjoy Alice in this scene, because at the end of the scene, you realize that she always planned to betray Grimes.
Yeah.
But for a second, you can believe that she's being tricked by him. And she just keeps saying, like, but I want to live. And I think that is so strong when you consider the context that R.F. Kuang put the story in, which is that going to hell itself is a metaphor for suicide.
And for most of the book, Alice was like, I don't want to live, in a way.
Yeah.
You know? And then she had to come to that realization that she's like, no, actually, there's more to life than me and Grimes and what our life was before.
Yeah. So I really enjoy Alice in that scene. I like the way that she tricks Grimes, like I was alluding to earlier, using Peter's work. I think that was really fun. And then we get Peter back.
Yes, Peter comes back. And as we knew he would.
Yeah.
Because if he hadn't, I would not have been happy. But yeah, that was... I also liked King Yama's portrayal.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
There's this joke he says when they're like about to leave hell.
Yes.
And he's like, remember, don't look back. And Alice is like, really? And he's like, nah, I'm just joking. You can look back as much as you want. Like, it's so funny.
I loved that too. I thought that was really funny. Yeah, I loved how like he was just this big guy that looked kind of grumpy, but was still like because at the end of the day, I think there was some kindness to him as well, you know? Like there's more. He's not... I like when the portrayal isn't like, oh, this big bad guy who's evil and hates everyone. Like, no, he's here dealing with souls, and you know, there's like... there's a process. Yeah. You know, hell is not... The whole thing with the hell wasn't just punishment, but it was also learning and transcending.
And the fact that... We didn't touch on it, but the fact that you see John, who actually does get reincarnated, like he crosses the river Lethe and gets his memories washed away through doing a selfless act. Yeah. And not through actually going through all the courts, like, you know, filling your dissertation, your paperwork, like actually by doing an act that you wouldn't normally do. Yeah. I think was good.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I almost wish we had seen a bit more of the court. You know, if we had spent a little more time in there, not in the city. I don't know. But
just a suggestion.
Yeah. I liked to... one thing I did like about the city was when they saw that deity. I forget what... But they were the one that looks like an elephant. And he was walking around the city and making people believe that the things that they did were justifiable. Do you remember that part?
Why do I just not remember this part at all?
It was like basically being like... And it was a scene where they were like if he makes you feel like everything you did was justifiable, then this is like pulling you back from understanding your errors and moving on. And he was just walking around being like, yeah, what you did, it's because you were really tired. It's because you did this and this. And then people would be like, yeah. And that would like kind of bring them back, which I thought was so interesting. I liked how there were different deities that would be in there, kind of like the Weaver Girl and stuff. And even King Yama was mentioned how he wasn't always there. He was currently there, but he was also eventually wanted to transcend and reincarnate and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah. I also like how when Alice showed up, before it was quote unquote King Yama, it was like, who do you want to speak to?
Yes.
And Alice got to like use her knowledge of like different chthonic deities and be like, who would I have the best chance with?
Yeah. And not just that, but she said that was the one that her parents knew more about and stuff, and like how what she grew up familiar with.
Yeah.
So I liked that.
I like that a lot too.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good book.
And just in general, once we get Peter back by the end of the book, I was so like the relief I had when I read that final chapter, because the way she describes Peter is like, at that point they like kiss each other and they are in love. My like hot take is that like I think this book would have been stronger personally if they ended up as friends, but I think if they just ended up with friends, people would have been mad. And also R.F. Kuang said that she based Peter a lot on her husband. So I can kind of see why it ended up as a romance.
Yeah.
But I was kind of swept up in it. Yeah. Because there's like this line where Alice is describing Peter and she's like fully just allowed in her head to like have these thoughts.
Yeah.
And she's like, wow, God carved this boy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so romantic.
I thought so too.
So I'm really excited to read. I think the Poppy War has a romance in it. So I'm really excited to read another romance.
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah. Because this book wasn't really, the romance was not a big thing at all, but just any moment that she would talk about how Alice would see Peter specifically, it was just like, yeah, you get it. Like, that is love. Yeah. And I liked at the end when she said something and he was like, it's because you're in love with me. And she's like, shut up, don't tell people that. I thought I really liked their banter and their kind of friendship and relationship. I wish we had spent a little more time with them, being more open with that. Mm-hmm.
But by the end of the book, like we get out of hell and I'm like, wow, this was an odyssey that I read. Like we went on a whole journey. Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, I don't hate that Peter died. I think that's the pivotal choice in the book that a lot of people are about, me included. I don't hate that Peter died. I can see how it affected Alice's growth. I just wish the city was different. Yes. And that we got Alice's growth in a different way. But I truly do think Rebecca sticks the landing. Yeah. Yeah. And you feel so much relief when Peter comes back.
Exactly, yeah. I wouldn't say, I don't hate that Peter died. Yeah. But I think I would have had more fun if he was there. But again, that moment was not about having fun, So it did work. I think this was a really well-crafted book. Yes. And she put so much work into it and so much care and thought. And I don't know. I feel like, part of me is like, this could have been a bit different but for my enjoyment in particular. But as the book itself, I think it's fantastic. I think she did an amazing job.
And I really recommend you guys read it. Yes. I know we are at the end of the spoiler section, so I hope you guys already read it.
But even if you now got all the spoilers and you haven't read it, it's still so worth it.
I do, honestly. I think this is a book where you can know what happens in it, but R.F. Kuang's writing really does bring it to life.
It's honestly a book that I will be recommending to people for sure. I am now, but I will be recommending to people. I already did. I already told some people in my life about this. And they're like, you should read it because I think this is a good one. Yeah. But yeah, so this is pretty much it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, any suggestions, any recommendations for future episodes, you can email us at betweenthebookspod@gmail.com, or you can also comment on Spotify. There's a little comment section. Make sure to also subscribe and give us a little rating. That'd be super nice. And next episode, we're going to kind of talk about some recommendations. Yeah. We're getting into fall. Summer's over. So sad. But we're going to give you some recommendations of books you can read in the fall and Halloween time. Yeah. And so you can look forward to that.
And we will see you in the next episode. Bye.